Welcome to our Paramotor Nation. Paramotor Nation is sponsored by iFly Indiana. iFly Indiana provides USPPA certified powered paragliding or paramotor training on their equipment or yours at prices as low as $2,000. Lone Star Paramotor. Lone Star Paramotor provides foot launch classes, trike training classes, transition to trike classes, and they are a USPPA certified flight school as well as an Aviator PPG Alliance partner. One Up Adventures and Paramotor Prop.
All right, looks like we're having a little technical difficulties there, so we're going to stop that right there. Sorry about that, guys. Welcome to our Paramotor Nation. I am David Wolfe. We are here tonight with Harley Milne. We've got with me also trike flyer Dave Ruff. Hey, Dave, how are you doing, sir?
Recovering, man. Recovering. Doing good otherwise.
What could you be recovering from? All right,
sure.
looks like we're having a little technical difficulties there, so we're going to stop that right there. Sorry about that, guys. Welcome to our Paramotor Nation. All right, someone's got their thing up tonight with Harley Milne. We've got with me also trike flyer Dave Ruff. Hey, Dave, how are you doing, sir? Give me 1 second, guys. I'm so sorry about
Recovering, man. Recovering. Doing good otherwise.
I think I was the guilty party. All right,
sure.
We're having a little technical difficulties there. I should stop in just a second. Hey, it happens on Tuesday night. It happens here too. That, guys. Welcome to our Paramotor Nation. It should cut off there just a second. Thing up tonight with Harley. Okay, sorry about that. I had an extra one. That was mine. I'm taking the blame on that.
Oh my God.
I'm sorry. Hey, I've got like 3 different screens up right now.
I'm looking all over the place thinking it's me.
No, it was me. You know what? I'm not gonna. I won't hide it. I had like 2 or 3 different YouTube tubes up there. I'm gonna really quickly go through my sponsors here. We'll go that in a second. Dave, go ahead, and you're recovering.
Yeah, recovering, and apparently you are too. And I feel you, brother.
That's it. I'm blaming on that. I am totally exhausted tonight, guys.
Oh, other than that, doing good, man. It was such a pleasure to spend the week with you and Ripman, and man, I can't wait for the videos to come out. But hey, more on that later. So back to you, Dave.
Ripman, Ridin. John,
hey guys.
Ripa, Mr. Stat himself, John Ripman.
Yeah, man, Mr. Full Stall to Backfly. I'll take that title.
That was awesome. I love that move.
Actually, I'm recuperated. It took a few days. My head was foggy, but I'm doing good. I'm ready to get back into the
I didn't think someone at your age could ever do what you did, but you did it there.
Shots fired. Shots fired.
Listen, I said to myself, if David Wolfe can do this, there's no way I'm not doing it. Unfortunately, David Wolfe went far and beyond what I can handle. So my hat's off. My hat's off to you, David.
All right.
You are the king.
These young whippersnappers, man.
Oh my gosh. And because of you two and just how comfortable your trailers were, I tore my entire trailer apart today and put insulation in there. And I'm just exhausted today. I got to thank our sponsors, iFly Indiana, Lone Star Paramotor. Who else we got? One Up Adventures, paramotorprops.com. Got to see Travis Burns and fly with him over the weekend in the Fly Products Flash Cruiser. That was absolutely awesome. Wisconsin Fly Sports, Fly PPG, Fly My PPG. Who else we got? Wicked Wings logo. I know I saw Craig Taylor in there as well. Aviator, PPG, and last but not least, PPG lights. I got to tell you, by the way, I flew last night with my son for Father's Day, and I was looking around, and I could just barely see his strobe. But when he landed, he goes, "Oh my gosh, Dad, those lights are so bright! No one in the world could miss you with those lights, those PPG lights." So, very cool product right there. So we're here.
Yeah, I got some good video of you flying into Wauchula when you and I took that flight out to that crane, and you turned those on, and I got some really sweet video of you using those things. Man, they look sharp.
I want to say hi to some of the folks in the chat. Chuck Johnson, first on the list in here, followed up by JP Tulo, Bill H, Ray Pierce, Craig Couch, Slow Days. I already said hi to Craig Taylor. I think I said Ray Pierce already. I know Linda is here. Linda Anderson's always in the chat. Slow days. J.R. Paramotor, if I'm missing you. I saw Mike Brennan in there as well. Casper PPG. Kelby Cox, who just celebrated her birthday. You know, another person that's in the chat right now, and she wasn't able to make it on the show, is Kate Bowen. Kate Bowen also celebrated a birthday just a little over a week ago. No one ever said happy birthday. So, Kate, happy birthday to you. Mitch Briggs is here as well. Chris with X36. I can't pronounce it all. D'Angelo. Anyways, hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us. We got Harley Milne here. And you never thought we'd get to you, did you, Harley?
Oh, no, I'm about to fall asleep.
Don't worry. Everybody does on this show.
All right. So Harley is here. So if you don't know anything about Harley, Harley Milne started a huge epic journey 7 months ago and decided, I'm just going to go touch every state and fly. And he had more than that just in mind. He wanted to raise some money for all the different charities around the country. And Harley, I'm going to let you start off by telling us how you started, where you started. I already know where you started, how you got there with the paramotor, why you did all this. Take it away.
All right. So I guess it was around about October 2018. I was trying to figure out what I was going to do after graduating business school. And so a road trip seemed like the thing to go do. I'd always wanted to see the whole country. And so if you're going to drive the whole country, you're certainly going to fly a paramotor in the whole country. So that kind of became the essence of what started. And then I wanted something good to come out of it. So that's the charity component. And really it was about creating inspiration for people to donate to charities of their choice and really just to give back overall.
How did you get to Florida with a paramotor to start this whole journey off? I'm sorry, not Florida, Hawaii.
I was thinking of that too.
Yeah, no, it was a very long walk across the ocean.
He flew.
Yeah, so what I did, I had looked at two different options. One was to consider flying the paramotor out with me to Hawaii, which is where it all started back on November 8th. But what I ended up doing was working with a guy by the name of Eric Weinhardt, who learned to paramotor more than 20 years ago. I believe he learned to fly with Bob, who used to be with Dell back in the day. And so he had a couple of Walker jets there and his flat top. And so all I had to do was take my wing and my helmet, and he set me up and conducted the first flight there, which was absolutely amazing. And so that was the beginning of the tour. It started relatively quietly, but the second flight that I had there ended up with an engine out, and I was like, oh my God, this is nearly over before it even starts.
I gotta say hi to my crazy Uncle Bob. He just donated $5 and said, "Greetings, deplorable infidel flying squirrels." Crazy Uncle Bob. My crazy Uncle Bob. He always shows up. Thank you, crazy Uncle Bob, for the $5 donation. So you're starting this journey, and that was one of my questions too. Is anywhere along this journey that you thought, you know what, I'm done. I can't do it anymore. I'm done. I gotta give up. Anytime did that ever come about?
Yeah, no, I can safely say that never actually entered my mind.
Wow.
When we started this trip, very few people knew what I was going to be doing, but it grew so quickly. It just kind of caught me a little off guard. I never imagined this trip would become what it is, but honestly, I've been very inspired by every person that I've met along the way, and it never occurred to me. And in fact, even over the sort of the second half where things, did change quite a lot in our country, and worldwide for that matter, it became a personal challenge really to go even harder to make sure it happened.
I wanted to ask you some statistical questions, and I kind of prepared you that I was going to ask you some of these, and I may ask more later, and some people in the chat may have some questions as well. All right. First of all, total miles that you drove. Any idea?
Yeah. So I still have about another 700 or 800 miles to get back to California, but it's pretty close to 23,000 miles that I've driven. And I towed the camper nearly 18,000 miles. So a fair amount. I think the truck speedometer, or the hour meter, shows about 600 hours in the truck.
Jeez.
David, that makes that little trip we just took to Florida not so bad, does it?
Yeah, it makes it look like child's play.
Yeah. And don't forget, I did your little trip back to Florida because
Yes, you did.
after I flew with you guys in Ohio, I drove all the way back down to Palm
Florida.
Bay. So
Yeah, that's right.
1,000 miles right there.
I know. It was like that. We didn't see that coming, but you had to go. It's where everybody was going to be. So, all right. Other question: how many tires did you have to change?
Well, it depends whether I had to change them once or twice. I think the first set of camper tires lasted 10,000 miles, and I actually took them all off the camper. They tried to replace them, and the place I took them to couldn't actually get the tires off the rims because of the anti-blowout system. So I ended up driving them all the way back from North Carolina back to Florida for them to actually do that. So, but technically I went through 5 tires because I had one of those camper tires nearly blow out of me in Wyoming, and had to replace that one. So I'm almost through a second full set. So 8 tires is about where it boiled down to. And my poor truck, I think, started off at about 17,000. I'm at nearly 40, and I think my tires are not much left on them.
What probably the most important question: how much money did you raise across the country?
Yeah, so I don't have a final number for that yet, and so I need to spend a little bit of time on it. But I mean, in direct donations out to various charities, it's between $5,000 and $10,000. Through the GoFundMe, I think there's about 800 or so, which I guess I may as well just announce that. So a lot of that money that came in through the GoFundMe was intended for me to offset my own sort of fuel costs. And I made the decision fairly early on that I wasn't going to take any of that money. So my plan is to actually donate that money directly to Resurgence PPG.
Nice.
And then I actually have a few other things that I don't know how I do this, but I kind of want to auction them off for fun, so that I can once again go ahead and raise some more money. So, at the end of the day, I paid for the trip on my own, but it would have been a lot more expensive without the help and support that I've had from the entire community. I mean, the number of hosts that have had me at their homes with the camper and helped me with hookups and so forth. I did not pay for a single place to camp the entire trip, which is
awesome.
Pretty amazing.
All right, so I know you didn't use just your own nitro. You had other motors as well. So altogether, how many hours did you put under glider?
Yeah, so with my Mosta 185, which of course is on the Black Hawk frame, I flew that in the contiguous 48, and there were over 100 hours, I think nearly 110, 120 hours on that motor throughout the course of the flight. I logged about 175 or 180 flights in about 85 different locations. So quite a lot, about 1 point something. There were some states where, like Florida, right? I must have flown in, I don't know, 10 or 12 different locations there. Of course, in every state I flew at least one, but there were some where I flew 2 or 3 different locations.
Here's a strange question. How many times did someone take you out to lunch and didn't pay for your lunch?
Just one.
Boy, I'd hate to eat with that asshole.
I think I know who that was.
Sorry.
Guys, imagine if you would that you get invited out to lunch, you order a beautiful lunch, and at the end of it, you find out the person that invited you out to lunch doesn't have their wallet or cash on.
Oh, David, your volume just went out. What happened? Oh my gosh.
Dave, alligator arms. Deep pockets and short arms.
There you go.
No. It was unintentional. I'll PayPal you the money. We went to a.
Harley, that was so intentional. He told me a week before he did it that he was going to do it.
And don't lie.
Yeah, no, we're gonna keep this story going for.
I'm gonna let you. Do you want to tell the? Do you want to tell the story, or do you want me to tell the truth?
Now you tell the story.
We went to this diner. It was at this adorable little racetrack, right? All right, we're eating there. We're waiting for. It seemed like forever for our food. Food came out. We ate. I was even saying, let's go to another place. Bill comes. It's cash only. I only have credit cards. I was like, I got that.
Yeah, I mean, it was a luck of the draw. Fortunately, I could afford to pay for 2 hamburgers at the time.
So, Harley, a big question. Since he was going to take you to another place, since he got away with it the first time with you paying, did you guys go to the second place?
I don't think I remember. I thought we were supposed to go out for dinner in the evening, but he said he's paying for my next SIV, so we're all set now.
Dave,
man.
I think your brisket's done, Dave. Maybe he has to leave us at 9 o'clock because he's got a brisket. He's got to go to someone's house.
8 hours slow cooking.
Oh, that sounds good.
Gonna fall off the bone.
That sounds good. There's a couple questions in the chat. Do you have any plans to fly in other countries or fly every continent?
Yeah, so I for a little while, pretty much once I hit I did an EAA interview out in Oshkosh, and I don't think that's actually publicized or published yet, but I have been thinking about what I wanted to do next, and I do realize that I don't know if I can go back to a normal life. I mean, this whole idea of going back to California is kind of daunting. I'm going to try and salvage what's left of my drone or aerial photography business. But I have started to talk about what I want to do next. And there really are 2 things that are, are you publicizing? I don't know if we can publicize that.
Is Mark Amos in there?
That's what I was about to say. Is Mark Amos in there? I see planets with Ripman.
This is my buddy Ryan. Ryan and I have known each other probably about 2 years. And I'm here in Portland, well, technically Oregon City in Oregon. So yeah, he's hosting me for the weekend. So there are 2 things that I wanted to do. The first was that I really like this idea of doing a cross country, coast to coast. I'm not going to be the first to do it, of course. Jean-Francois, I can't remember his last name, but he's pretty much done that with a few other guys, like I want to say Josh Bowden. I might have that wrong, actually.
No,
maybe
Josh.
So, but technically, as far as I know, they didn't actually. It was about a 20-mile piece that they didn't do. So, I don't know if I'm going to be the first. I have also been told that some free flight paragliders have tried to do it or did successfully do it some years back, coast to coast. But if I did try and do it, I'd have to try and do it as a speed record. And by just publicizing this, I think Bo is going to get flying tomorrow, and he'll probably beat me before I get the trip even planned. If I had my way, I would want to start a 50-country tour across all 7 continents, and I'd want to start tomorrow. That's the reality. Is if I could find a way to get that going, nothing would stop me. The reality is, I think we're just with the whole climate that we're experiencing now, I think we're probably at least another year away from being able to do that. Yeah. The guys like Matt Minyard, who I believe has actually flown all 7 continents, so I wouldn't be the first doing that. But certainly a couple people have shown some interest in the idea of me doing a coast to coast. And it's not a small undergoing, right? We're talking, as the crow flies, about 2,400 miles, and realistic, at least a 3,000-mile trip. And if you're going to do it with speed in mind, there's a few lessons to be learned from other people that have done it, where they're at 9,000 feet doing 80 or 90 miles an hour on a paraglider. Yeah. So it's not a small matter. I like the idea of doing it, and as I've shared the idea with a couple of people, if the sponsorship is there, I'm certainly not going to think twice. So I'm open. Have paraglider, will travel.
Yeah. I know Angela wanted to know where in Nevada did you fly? She's out in Nevada.
In Nevada. So Nevada was, I guess, technically my third state. So I'd gone from Hawaii back to California, up to Nevada. And so I actually flew I guess the official flight took place in Sparks off a tiny little closed down airstrip in.
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh. Ripa, continue the answer. Keep talking. It was a tiny little airstrip.
In Sparks.
All right,
Yeah.
he's back. Okay, we lost you for a second, Harley. You're saying a tiny little airstrip.
And
Sparks. Yeah, tiny, just outside of Sparks. I think it was called Spanish something or other. Each of the places that I flew is actually listed through the 50xchallenge.info website. There's a map there with, all the individual locations that I flew. Yeah. But I flew the Snake for the first time in Winnemucca, which was further, I guess, northwest of Nevada, or in Nevada, I should say.
By the way, Ripman, your job from here on out, if one of our guests or hosts loses connection in the middle of a sentence, you have to continue the sentence and story. Understood?
Check.
Whatever it might be, you just make it up as you go. All right. Harley, so you've seen so many. Oh, I wanted to ask you this. So when you were in Ohio, I signed your logbook. How many people did you meet? How many people signed your logbook and witnessed each flight?
Yeah, so my last count was around about 200.
Okay.
Different signatures. There were some places where, I got a lot of signatures, and there were some places where I just, even though I flew with a fair number of people, I mean, if I'd got everyone at Palm Bay to fly, I might have had 400 or 500 signatures. But I think the logbook itself, or the log sheets, it's pretty close to 200, I think, at this point.
Did you have
those would be notes that I'll publish at some
you
point.
flew multiple times in states. Did you document each flight, or just the first flight in each state?
So the log sheet typically has the official flights that logged that, but there were some cases like in Florida, because I flew in so many different places. I typically did have a lot of people sign the log sheet in those different areas. There were some places where, I flew with the same people in 3 or 4 different places, and so we didn't re-sign those sheets each time.
What were the top 3 highlights for you as you traveled across the country, besides Ohio, besides Cincinnati, Ohio? What were the other top 3 highlights?
It's really hard. You tried to tease me and make me cry a couple times talking about doing this trip, and there are some parts about the trip which is very emotional. So,
now, let me clarify that. I just said to Harley, when your boots touch the ground in Alaska and you have completed this, you're still a man in my book if you break down and start crying, because God knows I would.
Yeah, I didn't cry, but thinking about the highlights, it's very difficult for me to say that one place was a highlight over another, because in each state really was about the people that I met. And there were some very cool places that I did get to fly. I mean, flying up to the glacier in Alaska, that's one hell of a way to actually finish this tour. Definitely a huge highlight. I really enjoyed flying in Moab with my buddy Andrew, who's not a paramotorist, and going to Castleton Tower. That was a pretty big deal. Flying in Sedona, I had no idea what I was going to in Sedona, but it's a beautiful place. If you ever get a chance to fly down there, it's absolutely beautiful. And then, like I said, people, flying with Miles Dasher and Sean Schumer in Idaho was just something I never really anticipated doing, and it was huge. I think it maybe not so much a highlight, but certainly a turning point was, hitting Maine, flying with Johnson Q there, even in Rhode Island. Just Ray was fantastic. It was just spending all that time and almost a personal guided tour through Rhode Island and Massachusetts was just very cool. So it's just every step of the way has been so amazing. It's very, very difficult to pick, highlights.
Do you feel like, I mean, you've done something that, forget just even the paramotoring, just traveling the whole country. Not many people get to do that and meet all the different people from all over the country. Did you see like a distinct difference in the way people acted, or more of, hey, I went out to Maine and I expected people to talk like this and act like this?
I, I made a point of not having any preconceptions. I mean, before I started this trip, I had been to, I don't know, 30 or 35 states, and mostly had flown into those locations, or I had been there for a wedding or to see some friends or for business or whatever. But I mean, every location had its charm. Um, the hospitality was really the part that was incredibly amazing throughout the country. Obviously, some areas hospitality is considered a much bigger thing, and so
that must have been so
people,
good, with what's going on in the world, is to have that hospitality wherever you went, because there's a lot of good people out there. There really are.
I couldn't have done this trip. I couldn't have succeeded if it hadn't been for all that hospitality and the fact that people kept coming out. I mean, certainly there were a couple states where, especially as things were heating up, it was much more difficult to keep traveling, but people did keep coming out and keep supporting me. Yes, the groups did get smaller. I think maybe Connecticut was the first place where I thought some people were going to come out, and then it all shut down very, very quickly. And I had heard even that the National Guard was out stopping people with New York plates coming out. I didn't see it personally, but that occurred. But, I think the big surprise for me was in upstate New York, where I thought that was going to be a very, very tough state to try and complete. I had bypassed Philadelphia and Long Island. We had even talked about flying from Montauk back to the main island. I had talked to a few people about doing that. And all of that sort of came to a grinding halt. But I got to upstate New York, and 5 guys come out down to Marathon out of the blue and fly with me in not the best conditions, and then sleep in their cars in tents through 3 inches of snow overnight. And we do it all again in the morning.
How awesome.
That to me is very humbling. That's the kind of thing that almost brings me to tears, because I really didn't expect that, and it was just so incredible that, given everything that was going on, the paramotor community still came out and said, hey, we're going to do this with you. We're going to make it happen.
Great stuff.
John brings up a real good point there with everything going on. And specifically, and either, I don't remember if it was Dave or John said in the pre-show, I hate to see what's going on in the world overshadow just a huge accomplishment that you've done. And you said it hasn't. But you ran into a couple things. I want to talk about weather in a second, but as far as when COVID hit, which was right after Palm Bay, that we really started to see, okay, things are getting locked down here. I'm not gonna be able to go out and do things. That, and then of course later on, what's going on with our country right now with, however you want to, I don't even know how you phase what's going on in our country right now. What did you come across as you traveled across, I think, the north side of the country?
Well, my experience is really, being around, focusing on the fact that it was a road trip where I get to see the whole country. And the fact that, particularly as I was getting the other end, it became very real, not just for me, but for everybody else, that, oh my God, this crazy idiot's going to pull this off. He's going to fly in all 50 states. And so that's really where the focus has been with everybody that I've met. And honestly, people just, that's what we wanted to talk about, was the paramotoring and the experiences. And, it really, certainly, everything else that's going on did have some impact, particularly as I was more towards the East Coast than towards the Midwest, and then eventually towards the West Coast. But I'm grateful to say that, the focus has not been on everything else. And I have to admit, I kind of blinkered myself off to some of what was going on. I don't watch the news that much, so I could avoid having that negatively influence how I was feeling. And then the people that I met really were just so inspiring. They'd come out and, their idea was like, hey, where can we take you to fly? We want to show you these cool places that we like to fly. Or, hey, we're just so glad to meet you and have you here. And, just that we can set you up with a place to put that camper for a couple of days and so forth. So I can safely say that, despite everything that's going on, we've got to remember that we're Americans first. We work together, we try and help each other. And, despite everything that's going on online and in the media and so forth, we're here for each other. And that's the part that I'm very grateful for, because I couldn't have done it without everybody else.
Remember you telling me, as far as like what was required, there's a question as far as what's required to consider a state complete. You were just looking for one up and one down. Because I think at one point you said, yeah, I flew from Kentucky over Ohio, but didn't land in Ohio. And then I touched back down in Kentucky, and you were thinking about considering Ohio, but you didn't, right?
Yeah, so the rules are very clear, that it does require a takeoff and a landing within the state. And that has to be, properly observed, making the minimum altitude, and then properly witnessed and signed off from everybody. So
What was the minimum altitude?
500 feet.
Wow.
I didn't see you get above 500 feet.
You're fired.
I really have a hard time believing there was only one person that stiffed you with a lunch bill. I really don't believe that anyhow.
Hey Harley, he did the same thing to Ripa and I in Florida this past week too. He took us to this beautiful place, and we could order whatever we want. And Ripa and I actually kept it, right in the low to mid range, and he stuck us with a bill. So I feel you, brother. I feel you.
Low to mid range of a couple $100 for lunch, right?
No, those were drinks.
I used to have a friend of mine. We'd go out for dinner like once a week, and it was always amazing. The food bill was $15 and the drinks bill was $45. So
how does that happen? I mean, I've never been able to figure that out.
Yeah, me either.
We got in trouble with some tequila one night, for sure.
Yeah, brings trouble.
So let's talk about weather for a second. There was a time where you had nothing but bad weather going on, and that's got to be the ultimate in para waiting. How did you deal with that?
What a lot of people didn't realize was that, to get from one state to the next state actually took a fair amount of coordination. And so, you might fly in a state, but you were already calling ahead and trying to connect with people in the next one and finding out what weather was actually doing. And then, of course, doing all the social media and in some cases, actual media. So on average, I was completing about 1.6 states per week, pretty much up until I got to the Midwest. And I did slow things down a little, primarily because I wanted to get into places like Yellowstone and so forth. And so waiting for those things to kind of open sort of helped to slow things down. But addressing your question specifically, I think the worst weather that I had to wait for was about 3 or 4 days. So not really that bad in the big picture of things. Now, certainly when I hit, I think Indiana, and Dave Helcom set me up there. It snowed the night that I got there in the next couple days, and first window we got, we were able to go ahead and knock out a flight one afternoon. So that, there's definitely tougher. And had I not had a power hookup, I might have froze to death. I don't know, between the problems I had with the furnace periodically. But on average, about 3 to 4 days. Kentucky, this is embarrassing to say, but I'm trying to remember the guy's name that I flew with. But, we were trying to fly in the afternoon when I got there. We sort of left Indiana, came down to Kentucky, and had tried to get the flight down in the afternoon. And by the morning, I think it had snowed, good 3-4 inches. And we braved some pretty frigid temperatures that morning to get that flight done. And then, of course, by the time we got up to you, it was cold, but, the snow was all long gone. And
it was cold. It was cold. I
Yeah.
will say this about flying with you. You know, anytime anybody goes flying as a group or to fly in, what does everybody do? Ripa, what does everybody do? They look to see who's going to go up first and test it, right? Right. Well, when Harley's there, and yeah,
Wait
Dave
for
did
the
the other day.
dummy. Yeah.
The
I was
window.
gonna say I'm usually the test dummy.
Right. But when Harley's there and he's focused on completing a mission, man, you see him run out with that motor and like, yeah, Harley's going first. All right. I was
Yeah, I mean,
that night.
I flew in a lot of cold weather, right? I mean, if you think about it, had I moved the trip up, right? I was supposed to start the trip in sort of mid-January, and then sort of have it go through so that I would have been doing more of the trip through the summer. But as it happened, I was very fortunate that I did move it up and go to Hawaii back in November, because I might not have been able to complete this trip right now. So even by the time I hit Idaho, round about Thanksgiving, it was pretty cold. And so that was as far north as I was to begin with, but then I came, as far south as I could go, and even parts of Arizona. There's some flights in Flagstaff where, there's feet of snow. So I, definitely winter hung on this year. I keep joking about getting everybody to go back to work so that we can get global warming going again. Because really, after I left Florida, of course, I started heading north into colder weather, and it's stuck around a good whole month longer than one might expect it to.
Quick question. You were talking and Dave was talking, hey, Harley's the first in the air. So with that said, 50 states and all these flights, what was the spookiest where you really didn't want to fly, but maybe time dictated that you had to, or, what type of decision making was made with that? What was the spookiest flight?
I think the one that scared me the most and most recently was actually flying Devil's Tower out in Wyoming, because I was so determined to do it, and the weather had looked perfect, but it was a very, very small window. And I had never really taken off where you're taking off, like get the glider up, but barely sort of be tiptoeing, but in a sideways takeoff, because I only had, I don't know, maybe 50 yards, which was my runway, but the wind was coming directly across it. And I got up into the air, and, I was probably, I don't know, 500 feet up, and I started getting rained on. You could see some rainbows, and even that was all fine. You could see some rain in the distance. But on my way down, I hit this very, very gnarly thermal that was coming up, and it was like I sunk right into the middle of it. And I was probably about 800 feet up, but I remember coming through the side of it and looking at my feet. And after that, I was just looking down like, where am I going to put this down? Because this literally threw me back and forth. And I was like, there's no reserve to throw here today. And how was I going to do it? So that was it was a pretty gnarly moment. I'm glad that I've had some experience along the way to help me deal with that a little better. I think the only other time, and I think I learned this lesson much earlier in the trip, which is I did some press in Tennessee, and I took off in 15 with gusts to 20.
Ooh.
And I made the decision again that I wasn't going to try and do that. Of course, that press, I was picked up coast to coast on it, so it paid off, but I made a very clear decision I wasn't going to try and do that again.
Whatever happened to that newscaster you were hitting on?
You have to say that again. You were kind of
yeah, right. I said, what happened to that newscaster that you were hitting on? Anything work out there? Shut up,
I've
Dave.
been very fortunate. Most of the reporters that I have met are wonderful people, and I was very fortunate to meet a lot of them.
Harley's so neutral.
So
that is such a good answer.
Well played, sir. Thank you, Linda. Linda Anderson just donated to the show. Thank you so much, Linda. We really appreciate that. I'm sorry, Harley. That was so low of me.
Harley, quick question. D'Angelo wanted to know. He sorry if he missed what you said. When was your start and end date for this?
Yeah, so the start was I believe November 8th, out in Hilo, Hawaii, and it ended in Homer, Alaska on June 10th. So literally 7 months and 2 days, I think it was.
What an accomplishment!
I
Congratulations
gotta say,
again.
I don't know if how many people you called before me, but here I am. It's almost 2 a.m. I'm just getting on the highway to go down to Florida last week, and there's FaceTime. I'm like, who the hell is FaceTiming me at 2 a.m? There's Harley. But so, I know what that means. I know what that means, brother. That was awesome. I'm so glad you did call. Cool.
Yeah,
Cool.
no, my host Len was super cool. We had been watching the weather all afternoon, and we'd only reassembled the unit that hadn't been used in about a year. So we got it together and got it running, and we must have gone back down to the spit, as it's called. I must have gone back 5 or 6 times, and it finally died off. And like so many places, people would take a look at what was going on, and there were a couple of people, well, what's that? Well, it's a paramotor. And Len would pipe up like, hey, this final flight here for the 50 state challenge. And, people come hang out, and, they were just like, woo, which was so incredibly strange. But it was that kind of support, meeting people, that made this trip so incredible.
I've been flying for almost 2 years. I haven't been flying as long as the three of you have, but even still to this point, I don't think this feeling is going to ever go away, where I'm just get the jitters and I'm so excited before every launch. So in Hawaii, did you get that? Well, here we go. This is it. First few steps. And second part of the question, that last launch, where you going, this could be it, baby. 500 feet and bring those feet down, and this is done. Did you get feelings like that? Kind of walk us through both of those flights.
Yeah, the crazy thing with both Hawaii and with Alaska was that I was flying a machine I had never flown before, with an engine I didn't know that was going to be reliable or not. In both cases, we're trigger finger right throttle, and I'm typically a left throttle with my lower 2 fingers. So it's very, very foreign. And I had never really flown right-hand throttles before Hawaii. And I've done it a few times since then on this trip. But so not only were, the pressure of, okay, people are watching me now, because we all know, right? We blow launches, and we flub things every time people are watching. And so especially when there were press around, it was very, very stressful, because you didn't want to screw up. And fortunately, I never screwed up in front of the press, but as people know, in Branson, Missouri, it was pretty ugly. But I think what I learned through it was to really focus on what I was trying to do, which is focus on the same process of how I set up and how I launch, and hopefully everything goes well. But it's always a little stressful when people are watching you, and especially with equipment that I didn't know. And in some places, the launch sites were very short. As you see for the Hawaii one, it's a downhill run. I mean, literally 10, 15 feet, and you got to get the glider up and then run all the way down and take off. And the landings were downhill, where, you leave your balls on the back fence to try and make the landing.
I like that. I'm going to use that.
Any little help, Dave, right?
Absolutely.
Great question here from my buddy Bart Berry. He says, tuning your carb in all the different elevations across the country. What do you have to deal with that?
Yeah, so there definitely were days where, I would take off at, 5, 6, 7,000 AGL, and then other times back down at sea level. And initially, yes, I would have to sort of turn the screw a little bit one way or the other. What I elected to do, and as I've got to know my engine quite well, is I would often just mix my fuel slightly differently for each location. So if I was at sea level, My motor usually runs at about 330 Fahrenheit. So I'd run a little bit richer at sea level. I'd probably go down to 45 on the Model 710. But at altitude, I could get that back up to about 50. And so largely I'd mixed fuel rather than mixing with the needles each time. And that seemed to work for me. I don't know that it works for everybody. I would love to have had EFI because it would have made life a lot easier. There were certainly some times where my mid-range didn't feel that good. But overall, I'll say one thing about that motor was that it was very reliable. Yes, I broke some exhaust, but that's a whole different issue. But as a motor that was reliable, that could get me through all 50 states, it absolutely was the case.
Outside of the exhaust, what other mechanical issues did you have in all these flights?
So in terms of the motor, I didn't have any mechanical issues. I think I did go through a boot on the airbox, which once again was they've replaced those materials and they covered that under warranty. I think the biggest issue that I ran into was two things that were really just maintenance issues. One was that I had in Durant, I had those 5 engine outs in a row, which turned out to be a clogged fuel cap. So essentially no air coming into the tank caused a suction problem. And now it's just part of my process where before I put the cap back on, I actually try and suck through it, and it either works or it doesn't. And I make sure that I clean it, every 5 or 6 flights. So that was definitely self-inflicted. The other problem that I had, which it took me a long time to figure it out, was I had a short where the 2 lines in my throttle turned out they had rubbed on the edge of the section where the cables come in, and had literally like it was a hairline cut into those 2 lines. And so when I pulled the throttle up just to the right position, and it usually was when I was trying to stow my toggle on the left-hand side, I could get it to hesitate. And I actually caused engine outs probably 3 or 4 times that way. And the most notorious one, of course, was I had been flying in Rhode Island, caused that engine out and landed in the millionaire's backyard because I essentially shorted it out. So not long after that, I pulled the whole thing apart and found that short and was able to fix it. So those really were the 2 issues. I think one other time I found another short where the wires just, they rub, they can wear, and broken wires are quite the norm, especially with that amount of flying.
Sure.
Yeah, without a doubt.
What about gliders? How many gliders did you have? Did you have certain gliders for certain conditions?
Yeah, I if you go by Eric Fairwell, I needed 7. I only had 2 of my own gliders. Of course, I had the Nitro, which I flew initially in Hawaii and in California and Nevada, but pretty much for the rest of the trip, I flew the Snake. And I flew that in a lot of states and in a lot of conditions. Definitely some, high altitude made that 18 Snake pretty small to try and launch in, especially with, full loads of fuel. It's a long run to try and get off the ground with.
How much you weigh, Harley?
$185 right now.
Okay.
A little on the chubby side.
Okay.
So, the cool thing was I got to fly a lot of other people's gliders. I've lost count, but I guess I'll go back and look at the log. But I think I flew nearly 15 to 20 different gliders, and I flew, I think, 6 or 7 different units from other people that led me to fly.
Any glider stands out to you that you liked?
Once again, I think it's very tricky to try and pick any one glider. I think the one thing I've learned through this trip was if you're going to try out a glider that you want to learn to fly, you've got to kind of fly it in every condition that you can possibly think of before you make that decision to buy it. And
I
clearly
agree.
the snake is not the best glider to go fly in all kinds of conditions. If you're going to do cross country, well, I burn, almost a third more fuel flying that snake. The warp comes up incredibly fast. Almost too fast for me. My reactions are not fast enough. I like flying the BGD because it was surprisingly fast on the cross country, and I didn't expect to see that. I'm a big fan of the Gin Carve. I've flown pretty much a 22 all the way down to like a 16. So I've flown a lot of the different sizes, and I think because I got hurt a couple times when I first started flying, I've always been very cautious about flying other gliders. And what I learned to do through this trip was I could lay out a glider and fly it and not even have to kite it. And that's obviously easier to do with an A glider than it is with the C. But
Right.
I got confident enough where I could feel what a glider was doing, what it was telling me, and fly it. And so, London Ivy gave me like a Piper 22. And that was a pretty crazy wing for me to fly at that point in time. Like,
Yeah,
it
that thing's a
dived me.
rocket. That
It
thing's
is,
a
it's a
rocket.
rocket.
I've flown that thing, and it is a rocket.
Yeah. So I like flying it, and I look back over the experiences. I mean, I remember Eric Fairwell trying to get me to fly, his 16 free ride, and I laughed at him. I said, "I'm going to die on that thing," and I did. I finally flew John's. I think it was I take it back. It might have been a 19 free ride, but I flew that out in Green Bay out with Mark Amundsen, and I got on the ground with that thing, and I said I was taking it with me because I was having so much fun with it. So, pretty much my attitude now is you can throw almost any glider at me, and I will fly it within reason.
Good.
I was very, very fortunate that Tucker let me fly a couple of his wings or one of his wings. I flew out in Montana. I can't even remember the name of the glider right now. The Nivik
Cubic.
Well, I flew the Cubic with Tucker, and then I flew the
Cougar.
the Cougar 3
Right.
out in Montana, and it was a slightly bigger wing, right, than the one that he'd had problems with, and so I actually had a lot of fun on it. I actually broke the seat on that Scout that afternoon, so I'd never done that before.
Yeah.
Jeez. There's a couple of things here in the chat that I want to go back and make sure we hit. Kevin Can Fly is dying to extend an invitation for you to come fly with him. Do you know Kevin?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Kevin's been following along every inch of the way. I think my goal, if I can pull it off next year, I have no idea how I'm going to pay for any of this, but I think I've said a few times, if I have my way next year, I would love to go back and do every possible fly-in throughout the entire country. I don't know how I do that, but it would be a huge honor to come back and sort of get to once again go to the fly-ins and meet people that I didn't get a chance to meet, and just to fly with so many more people. It's really been a huge honor every inch of the way.
Yankee wants to know, do you know Jean-Francois Cabot?
So I can't say I know him personally. I talked to him on the phone while I was out in Alaska, and we probably had about a 20 or 30-minute conversation, and he filled me in on a bunch of stuff around his trip. So I feel like I have a lot to learn from his experiences, and I understand he has some great things of his own coming along. So it was a big privilege to talk to him, and hopefully I'll get to fly with him soon.
There you go. Joe Rothfuss, thank you for the $2.99 donation. He put a message in here saying, don't forget to like the video to give Harley props. So, Harley, I know you're not watching the YouTube, but I'd, maybe tomorrow, if you have some time, go back and take a look at the chat and see what everybody else has to say in here. What else do we have? Nick Griffith. Oh, no, that's something else. What is the man? Catch me up, guys, if I'm missing something here.
Greg
Kevin
Taylor
says he's
going-
15 minutes away from Harley right now.
There you go.
There you go,
in
Kevin.
Oregon?
Yeah, he's right down there. He's in Oregon City right now, or right in that area.
Craig
Oh,
Taylor.
dude, just he should just give me a DM quickly, and maybe we'll fly in the morning before I head out.
There you go, Kevin. Now, Kevin, shut up, man. Jeez.
Yeah, there's actually an airport not far from where I am that I flew at once before, Mariana or something like that. We're gonna fly there for sure.
There you go. Craig Taylor, thank you for the donation. $26. Trade for likes. Trade for likes. He's donating $26 to the show to get more likes for Harley.
He's got to do 50 likes for the 50 states.
Yeah. Here's a question for you.
Oh.
Your YouTube channel, 50X Challenge, right? Are you going to be changing the name of your YouTube channel now that it's over?
No, I kind of like the idea. Is it's just we're gonna just come up with different 50 type challenges, right? It's just 50x it, right? Don't 10x it, 50x it, whatever it is.
50X days back at my job. What does DM mean? What does DM mean? Kevin wants to know what DM means.
Direct
Kevin-
message.
Yeah, just
Yeah.
look. Okay, hey, Dave, I got this. Kevin, look at me. Right. Go ahead and message Harley. I understand you're in Sherwood. He's in Oregon City. You're 20 miles apart, dude. Listen, before you get some stalking charges going on here, just direct message him and fly in the morning, man. That love you, Kevin. Okay, back to you, Dave.
Some of the comments from some of our panelists
I-
do not reflect.
I tell you what,
or
Dave,
express
he can
conditions
call
of the
you
channel.
quickly to get my number.
Kevin, I'll
Tell
just
you
give
what, yeah, actually, Kevin, just go ahead and message me. Actually, I think I have your number. Just message me your number. I'll put it in the internal chat.
I got a better idea. Let's take a look at Kevin. Harley's phone number is it's 415-999. No, I'm kidding. I won't do the rest of it.
Oh, that's funny.
1-800-HOT-WINGS.
Plenty of people have that number. It's fine for people to have it. Of course, my company's out there. It's not that difficult to get hold of me.
Harley, I'll make you an offer right now. I think here in 4 more years, we have the solar eclipse going on.
Oh, yes.
I am in Texas in the direct path of totality here on the property. You and, of course, other people I'll be inviting are welcome to come out here because I plan on putting up in the air. We have an LZ right here and plan on putting up in the air. So
I'm looking forward to it. Yeah, I mean, like I said, have Paramotor will travel. It's I think I didn't necessarily get to fly all the best places or all the best weather. So
you got to fly
super
Devil's
exciting.
Cant or Devil's Tower. I would have foot drug that sucker.
I rode out there.
Believe me, I tried to get out there, but first of all, there's actually a 3-mile
Yeah, it's all
limit.
state.
That
Yeah,
Oh.
you can't go near that thing.
So
By the way-
technically, as long as you're over it at I don't even think there's a 2,000 foot limit on it, but you have to be over it, not parallel with it within 3 miles.
By the way,
So if
I
I'm
got a
like a
question
foot
for-
and a half off the top of it, then I'm legal, right?
I don't know, Dave. I don't think
I'm
so.
not the right person to ask that question.
Harley, I got a question for you. Have you ever done an SIV? And if not, do you plan on doing one in the future?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have not done an SIV. It is almost maybe the first or the second thing I need to do next. I think one of the decisions I very clearly made along this trip is that I do need a reserve now. And primarily, I didn't fly with a reserve before.
you didn't have a
because I
reserve the
never-
whole
What?
time. You didn't have a reserve.
Not one. Nope, no reserve.
Crazy.
Because my attitude around it was that I've never flown in conditions or flown in a manner that I felt that it was necessary. And of course, as I've learned to fly that snake, and I'm pulling maneuvers that I never thought I would ever get to do, clearly that need exists now. Now, theoretically, I should have maybe taken an SIV a while ago because I could have developed some skills that I maybe didn't have for this trip. But I've learned a lot. I know I've got a lot more to learn, and definitely a reserve and an SIV are the next two shopping list items. And actually, I did send out an email today to try and figure out how I can get into an SIV. So maybe two of them. Maybe I need to do one on the West Coast.
I want to add something
to
what you're saying. You've been flying and you never needed one. So I flew for 3.5 years, and at the Palm Bay fly-in, I took a 50% collapse going by some trees, and that's my home spot. I fly there all the time, and I thought I was going to just fall out of the sky and hit the ground. And before I even looked up, the wing popped out and spun me 190 degrees, and I was able to fly away. But I had never experienced anything like that. And I have been flying all types of wings in all types of conditions. I free fly. And my point is something can happen at any time unexpected. And, if you have the reserve, you have that second chance. If you don't have the reserve and you plummet to the ground, it's lights out. So,
yeah, I agree with you. I think my experiences so far is that most of the things that have, either got me hurt or nearly got me hurt were, of course, far too low to the ground for a reserve to be helpful. But believe me, Devil's Tower, when I came through that thermal, it was definitely one moment I was like, I wished I knew that I had it so that I could have tossed it if I had needed it.
Sure,
because
sure.
it was a very clear moment there when I was like, okay, I don't know how or where I'm going to put this down, but it's going to be quick if something doesn't change.
Yeah.
So
I recently opted out to land out. I just wasn't feeling it. The conditions were just a little too much for me at that point of time, and I just landed out. I just made the decision. I live to fly another day. Maybe nothing would have happened. Maybe something would have happened. I don't know. Just I made a decision to land out. So
there's certainly no reason not to have one if that's your choice to do so. And I encourage people to do it. Not that I have done that. Like I said, I've been an exceptionally conservative pilot through most of my experience, and predominantly because I didn't necessarily have a lot of confidence in my skills early on. I think anyone who knows me that saw me flying in California will tell you that I'm not the same pilot that left California 7 months ago. I've learned a tremendous amount, not only from flying a different location and different conditions almost every single day, but just even flying lots of different gliders. I kind of, looking back, it would be kind of nice if a lot more of the schools had more varieties of wings, so that you could try lots of gliders. And get that experience.
Schools have a quota to make, and they've got a bottom line, and they're going to sell the glider that they're selling, and that's the only ones you're going to be trying if you go to a school. That.
Yeah, no, I get it. My point is simply that if I had been pushed to fly more different or lots of different gliders earlier on in my paramotoring, I think I would have been a much better pilot sooner. Now, there are other professionals out there that will probably tell you that's, maybe not the right advice to have. But I know for me personally, had I not been pushed to fly that nitro when I wouldn't have progressed. And so, now I'm 20 plus wings in, and I can't wait to fly the next thing I haven't flown. Pulling nearly 70 miles an hour in a spiral on an F1, that kind of blew me away. I never thought I would be doing something like that.
Crazy.
I am GPVA certified by Kevin Woodward, and he told me that the reserve isn't really to throw; it's to land on. So especially if you're below 500 feet, when you come down, you just land on it. It gives you an extra cushion. You land on that hip where the reserve is. That's really what a reserve is for. It's not to throw it; it's to land on it, and you just kind of bounce off of it and you walk away from it. So don't laugh; it's true. It's Kevin GPPA certified.
I remember out in up near Sacramento, flying with a group of people up there. It's a PPC group. It'll come to me in a minute. But being out there one day, and One guy went up 15 minutes before I went up and took a total collapse and through a reserve, and he landed in the only tree that was there. And I saved his life. And that was
Amazing.
15 minutes before I went up. So reserves are, there for
Hey,
a good
Harley,
reason.
Greg Taylor wants to know if you had flotation while you were
Yeah,
flying.
good question.
Yeah, so I do have flotation. I didn't have it on for the entire trip. Once again, I think early on in the trip, I wasn't flying very much over water, so it really wasn't a necessity. I did add it on when I started flying a lot more over water on some days. But, one thing I'll say is that, first of all, early on in the trip, I tended to be quite conservative, mostly because I'm a conservative pilot. But towards the end of the trip, with the stakes being so high to actually finish, once again, I started to get quite conservative in terms of the flying. So while I would still do some very nice wing overs on my Snake, I tended to take the flying location fairly seriously, and make sure that I could succeed. Of course, flying in Alaska, if you look at some of the video that I posted today, we took off
Beautiful.
the spit. The spit's about 3 or 4 miles long, I think, but we had about a 3 or 4 mile stretch of water to get across over to the side of the glacier. And so what most people can't see is not only did I have flotation, actually I take that back, we didn't have flotation on the actual paramotor itself, but I had a life vest on, a very thick life vest, so I would have floated for that one. But we got up, to get those 3 miles across, I think I was at nearly 3,500 feet in altitude on the way across, and on the way back, because I had a slight headwind, I actually pushed it up to about 4,400. So altitude was my friend in a lot of those cases. And certainly, yeah, a lot of places I had flotation on my own motor.
Good stuff.
How's this affected you spiritually? How's this changed you as a person?
I mean, I think I've shared before that, part of this trip was very multifaceted. It's a road trip, it's about paramotoring, it's about raising money for charity, but it's also been a trip for me to try and sort of personally heal from some things that have been going on the last few years. And turns out there's some experiences I've had in life that have been affecting me for a lot longer than I ever thought they were. I'm always reminded how I feel very humbled throughout this entire trip, because honestly, everyone that I've met have been, sort of perfect strangers who are just there to say, oh my God, this is so cool what you're doing. We're so excited for you. And it's very humbling. And so, I think that's something that I'm going to take away with me for a very long time, is that I'm more worried about the end of this trip and going back and trying to face reality of what am I going to do next? How do I go back and run my business or work for somebody? I really don't want it to end. I want to keep going out there and flying and meeting people. And that's the part that gets me the most emotional. But honestly, I feel incredibly humbled by everyone that I've met, and I hope that never leaves me.
That's awesome. Yeah, no, that one, you'll always remember that, without a doubt. Any more questions, Dave?
I'm almost, kind of a loss. I mean, I know we've talked about a lot, and all the statistics that go into it, just mind blowing. The accomplishment when you think about sitting in that seat for that long, and not just the paramotor seat, but also the vehicle seat and traveling that much. I mean, that's just exhausting. And you got to think about that as part of the accomplishment, not just that he was able to hit all 50 states, but just to do what he did.
I mean, are you looking forward to getting back and sleeping in your bed, or you're pretty much over that and the trail is your bed?
No, well, the camper is my home, right? Has been since I started this trip. I gave up the rental that I had. I had sold my home
Okay.
A couple of years ago when I went back to business school. That's how I paid for that. So the camper is my home. I mean, honestly, the most daunting part right now is trying to figure out where am I going to take my camper that I can have it somewhere with hookups and try and make that a home with some normality and wake up there more than 3 or 4 days later. Because on most places, I think the longest I stayed in any one place, I think was about 6 days, 7
Yeah, I
at the
mean,
absolute
for
outside.
you, it was like every few days you were packing up and moving along. It must have been
Yeah,
crazy.
exactly.
I mean, we did a little
So
small trip and we were like, oh, okay, when are we going to go home and get in our own beds, you know? So I
yeah,
could imagine.
my
Yeah.
camper needs a new mattress. There's no doubt about that. Definitely, you know, I've had more back spasms towards the end of the trip, always picking up the motor from the one side. You know, I've definitely had more strains there. And, but honestly, I just, I want to stay in the camper. I want to keep going. I mean, honestly, I think if I got an invitation to drive somewhere, I'd be very hard pressed. In fact, the only reason I'm kind of in a rush to get back to California over the next couple of days is I have a job that none of my other pilots are available for. So I'm going to
Okay.
go out and get it done. And, you know, there are some things on my camper that need to be worked on. So I'm going to have that worked on, and who knows what's going to happen next. I mean, like I say, have Paramotor, we'll travel.
Well, let me use that as a good transition here, because I mean, John, myself, and Dave, we've been in a buzz the last several days after doing the SIV course at Skylab with Andy and Leah. And Leah, I see, is now in the chat. We're putting out videos. We've been talking about it on Ask Aviator. We talked about it Wednesday night. We're going to be talking about it again next Sunday. We're going to have, unfortunately, we had a great interview with Eric Farewell at Ask Aviator this past Tuesday. Unfortunately, though, the video didn't come out at very spotty. The audio was a little spotty. I think at the very end it kind of cut off, and it was just a great interview. And unfortunately, it was the first time in the Ask Aviator show history that the chat wasn't able to ask questions. And I know there was a lot of questions that people had for both Andy and Leah. And so we thought we want to give everybody an opportunity to do that. So we're going to kind of have that interview all over again here next Sunday night. Harley, I invite you to watch it, but even more so, I invite you to get to that SIV class down at Lake Wales at Skylab, because as we were talking about in the pre-show and at the beginning of the show, you know, our heads have been just foggy and exhausted and spinning. And I you know, you talk about you want to get out there and do it all over again. And I was just saying that, and I've been saying that for days. I wish I was still down there doing my SIV, because it was so much fun and exciting and just changed me. And Ripa, what do you think, man? It changed you?
I tell you what, it's a different world right now for me.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to say happy Father's Day to everybody out there, all the fathers. Happy Father's Day. My wife asked me earlier if we were doing a show tonight. I said, well, I did one on Mother's Day. I think it's only fair I do it on Father's Day too. So, and, you know, we had somewhere around 40 to 45 people watching. And I want to thank everybody for tuning in. You know, not only is it a holiday today, but also it's the summer. And if you look at all the three big shows across the board, you know, Thursday night, Sunday night, and Tuesday night, the attendance for the shows is a little down because it's summertime. It happened last year, and it's going to happen every year that people are out flying more or out with their families. So I really thank everybody for tuning in each and every Sunday night. It's wonderful. Harley, any last thoughts? I'm going to actually, while you're giving your last thoughts, I'm going to post right now in the chat the Zoom meeting ID and password. So if anybody wants to come in and say hi to Harley or congratulate him, they can do that here in just a minute. Just as soon as we end the show, we'll go ahead and let people in. But Harley, any last thoughts for you before we go off the air?
Yeah, just two things. So one is that I really want to just thank everybody, because the support and the encouragement and just everyone supporting me along the way has been absolutely incredible. So I wanted to take a moment just to say thank you. And the only other thing, it's a little tongue in cheek, but as most of you know, I flew with a particular pair of boots in every state. And I said there was a bit of a story. So I'll share that story very quickly, which is that I've had those boots since I started flying. I broke both my ankles and my shoulder with that pair of boots. But they've now flown in all 50 states, and they've now been officially retired. So I was thinking I should try and auction them off for about $10 towards towards some charity.
Were
and
they
so,
your good luck boots? Were they your good luck boots?
I don't know if they were good luck because I got hurt on them a couple of times, but
I still have my original pair from my first flight, and I occasionally I'll wear them, but I pretty much retired them as well. Yeah, they're banana peels, so they could be slippery.
So the boots are kind of a collector's item. Of course, my Moto 2 is flown in 48 states, so they're pretty significant pieces of gear right now. But if anyone wants to donate to Resurgence for those boots, let me know.
I'm actually going to make a $20 donation tonight, and that's the cost of our lunch. So I'm going to call it paid in full after I make that $20 donation.
You know what, Harley, what size are you, Harley? I'm thinking of these boots for Dave, Trike Flyer.
Oh no! Wow, that'd be
Harley,
like
what size are they?
I think they're a 10.
I think he's a little bigger than that.
Yeah, I think Dave's like, I don't know, probably a 15, right? He's got big feet.
No, he's probably a 12-ish.
I was going to give his phone number out early in the show when he was talking about having everybody out in 4 years at his place for the eclipse. I was about to give his phone number out. Harley, I'm honored that you joined us tonight. And this was history. You made history, brother. Congratulations.
Yeah, man. Thanks a lot, Harley. And I followed your journey, and it was a hell of an accomplishment. Yeah. Unfortunately, what's going on in the world, it might be a little overshadowed, but, us Paramotor guys, we know what you did. We know what you accomplished, and we appreciate, all the places you've flown and all the things you've done and all the things you've posted. So, yeah, my hat's off to you, too.
I don't feel overshadowed at all. It's just been an amazing journey.
It's awesome, man.
Good stuff.
All right, Harley, don't go anywhere. We're going to stay for the after show in just a second. Everybody else, thank you so much for tuning in. We will see you next week. We got Skylab. Andrew and Lee are going to be here. Ripman's going to be back. I'm going to be back. Dave will be back. And hopefully Kate and Rick will be joining us as well. So we'll see you guys then. Have a great week, and happy Father's Day, everybody.
See you, everybody.